What you experienced wasn't a person, it was a performance. That's why it felt so convincing, and that's why it vanished so completely. Narcissistic manipulators don't introduce themselves. They audition, they study, they observe, they adapt. What you met wasn't their identity. It was a character assembled in real time to fit the room, the moment, and most importantly, you. This is why they seem to understand you so quickly, why they mirrored your values, why their interests aligned almost too perfectly with yours. It wasn't chemistry, it was calibration. A performance only works if the audience believes it's real. And you did, because it was tailored specifically to your emotional language. That doesn't make you naive, it makes you human. The role they played was responsive, attentive, and emotionally fluent. It felt alive because it was constantly adjusting. But here's the part people struggle to accept. A role has no continuity. There is no true version behind it waiting to be recovered. No consistent self hiding underneath the mask. Only the next role for the next audience. This is why, when the dynamic shifted, the person you knew didn't argue to stay. They didn't fight to repair. They didn't try to explain themselves. They simply changed characters. Because performers don't repair relationships. They exit stages. The shock isn't that they became someone else. It's that they always were. And once you see that, once you realize the personality you bonded with was a role being played, something irreversible happens. You stop trying to reach them, because you finally understand there was never anyone there to reach in the first place. In the next chapter, we'll break down why everything feels scripted in hindsight, and how recognizing the pattern ends the illusion completely. When you look back and realize the narcissist always seemed to know exactly what to say, it's because they weren't speaking, they were performing. Once the illusion breaks, the past rearranges itself. Moments that once felt spontaneous start to feel rehearsed. Conversations replay in your mind with a strange mechanical rhythm. You notice how often they mirrored your thoughts, your values, your emotional language, almost perfectly. That wasn't intuition, it was observation. A narcissist doesn't express a self. They assemble a response. They watch how you react. They track what gets approval. They repeat what lands. That's why it felt effortless. Not because the connection was deep, but because the performance was adaptive. They weren't sharing who they were. They were calibrating to who you were. This is why the relationship accelerated so quickly. Why understanding felt instant. Why it seemed like you'd finally met someone who got you. It wasn't chemistry, it was precision. And precision creates the illusion of intimacy. But once you stop feeding the performance, once you stop reacting, affirming, and adjusting yourself, the script starts to malfunction. They reuse phrases that no longer fit. They repeat explanations that don't resolve anything. They escalate when improvisation fails. That's when you notice something unsettling. The narcissist doesn't reflect, they recycle the same justifications, the same emotional beats, the same patterns deployed again and again. This is why arguments felt circular, why apologies felt empty, why closure never arrived. You weren't talking to a person processing events. You were interacting with a role responding to cues. And roles don't grow, they repeat. Once you see that, the confusion lifts. You stop wondering why they couldn't understand, why they didn't change, why depth never appeared. They weren't failing to be real, they were succeeding at performance. In the next chapter, we'll break down mirroring, how the narcissist became exactly what you needed, and why that precision is the clearest evidence the self you bonded with never existed. When the narcissist felt instantly familiar, it wasn't fate, it was mirroring. Mirroring is how the performance gets constructed. They watch what excites you, what hurts you, what you admire, what you fear becoming. Then they reflect it back with precision. Same values, same interests, same wounds framed as understanding. It feels intimate because it's accurate, but accuracy isn't authenticity. A narcissist doesn't reveal who they are. They replicate who you are, just convincingly enough to feel like connection. That's why the bond felt unusually deep, unusually fast. You weren't being seen. You were being matched. They learned your emotional language early. How you express care, what makes you feel safe, what makes you stay. Then they adopted it. This is why the version of them you met felt irreplaceable, because it was tailored specifically to you. No one else got that version. No one else ever will. And that's the part that hurts, until you see what it really means. That version wasn't rare. It wasn't special. It wasn't real. It was responsive. Mirroring creates the illusion of soul-level connection because it removes friction. Everything aligns because nothing originates. There's no inner conflict, no independent stance, no core identity pushing back. Just reflection. And reflection feels validating until you stop providing the image. The moment you assert a boundary, the moment you disagree, the moment you stop reinforcing the role. The mirror cracks. They struggle to respond without your cues. They become irritated when alignment breaks. They grow cold when the reflection doesn't return. Because mirroring only works when someone stays still. Once you move, the performance can't follow. That's when the confusion begins. You wonder where the person you knew went, why they changed so abruptly, why the warmth vanished. They didn't change. The mirror just lost its subject. In the next chapter, we'll break down why the performance couldn't last and how the moment you stopped playing along exposed the emptiness underneath. When the narcissist starts to feel inconsistent, it's not because you changed, it's because the performance is exhausting to maintain. A role can only survive as long as it's reinforced. Mirroring requires constant input, approval, reaction, emotional feedback. The moment you stop supplying those cues, the performance begins to strain. They hesitate, they contradict themselves. They respond too late or too aggressively, not because they're conflicted, but because there's no stable self to fall back on. A real person can disagree and remain intact. A performer collapses when the script breaks. This is why the shift felt sudden. One day they were attentive, aligned, present. The next, distant, irritated, defensive. You didn't do something wrong. You disrupted the structure holding the role together. A narcissist doesn't have an internal compass. They orient themselves externally. So when your reactions changed, when you stopped validating the performance, they lost direction. And here's the unsettling truth. They weren't hiding their real self from you. There wasn't one waiting to emerge. There was only pressure revealing emptiness. That's why repair never felt real, why accountability sounded scripted, why promises lacked weight. They weren't integrating feedback. They were attempting to stabilize a failing act. And when that failed, the tone changed. Confusion turned into frustration, frustration into control, control into punishment. Because when a performance stops working, the narcissist doesn't reflect. They escalate. The warmth wasn't withdrawn because you were unworthy. It vanished because it was never sustainable. And once you understand that, something crucial shifts. You stop chasing the version you met. You stop hoping it will return. You stop negotiating with a role, because you finally see the truth. The performance didn't end because you failed it. It ended because it was never real enough to last. In the next chapter, we'll examine what happens when the audience stops applauding, and why the narcissist reacts so aggressively when attention disappears. When the narcissist senses your attention pulling away, the performance turns hostile. Applause is their fuel. Validation is their oxygen. Reaction is proof they exist. So when you stop responding the way you used to, when admiration fades into neutrality, something primal activates. Panic, not sadness, not reflection. Threat. Because without an audience, a performance has no purpose. This is the moment the tone shifts. The warmth disappears, the charm hardens. You notice the sudden criticism, the passive jabs, the emotional pressure disguised as concern. They aren't trying to understand you. They're trying to re-engage the audience. When praise no longer works, they provoke. When connection fails, they destabilize. Any reaction is better than silence. This is why conflict suddenly escalates over nothing, why small boundaries trigger outsized responses, why you're accused of changing, withdrawing, or becoming cold. You didn't withdraw. You stopped clapping. And a narcissist without applause feels exposed. They scramble to regain control of the narrative. They rewrite events. They position themselves as misunderstood or wronged, not because they believe it, but because they need engagement. What they can't tolerate isn't rejection, it's indifference. Indifference reveals the truth they spend their lives avoiding, that without performance, there is no substance. Without reaction, there is no self. And this is where the empath begins to see clearly. You realize the conflict isn't about the issue, it's about access. They aren't hurt by what you did. They're threatened by what you stopped giving. Once you see that, the dynamic changes permanently. You stop trying to soothe. You stop explaining. You stop defending. Because you understand now, you weren't loved for who you were. You were valued for how well you played your role in their act. And when you step out of the audience, the show collapses. In the next chapter, we'll break down why the mask slips under pressure and how the narcissist reveals more in moments of stress than they ever do in calm. When pressure enters the room, the narcissist stops performing and starts malfunctioning. Calm environments allow the act to breathe. There's time to mirror, time to adjust, time to curate responses. Pressure removes that luxury. This is why the narcissist becomes most revealing when things don't go their way, when challenged unexpectedly, when boundaries hold, when control isn't immediately restored. Under pressure, they don't become more honest. They become more primitive. The charm fractures into irritation. Confidence hardens into arrogance, not because they're showing their true self, but because there is no buffer left to maintain the role. A real person under pressure can self-regulate. They pause, reflect, and adapt internally. A narcissist can't. They escalate externally. This is when you see contradictions pile up. Stories shift mid-sentence. They aren't lying strategically anymore. They're reacting. And reaction exposes something unmistakable. There is no inner anchor, no consistent belief system, no stable emotional core, no self that exists independently of control. That's why accountability feels impossible. Why conversations derail the moment they're cornered. Why pressure produces aggression instead of clarity. The mask didn't fall off. It was never attached to anything solid. And once you witness this, once you see how quickly coherence collapses, when the environment stops cooperating, you stop searching for depth that was never there. You recognize it for what it is, a performance exposed by pressure. And from that moment on, something shifts in you. You stop trying to stabilize them. You stop cushioning the fall. Because you understand now, if the mask can't survive pressure, it was never a face. In the next chapter, we'll examine how the narcissist adapts instead of reflects, and why every change you see is just another costume, not growth. When a narcissist appears to change, it isn't growth, it's a costume change. Reflection requires a stable self, accountability, the ability to sit with discomfort and integrate it. A narcissist can't do that. So when they're confronted, exposed, or pressured, they don't look inward. They rebrand. You'll notice it immediately. Sudden new values, sudden self-awareness that feels oddly rehearsed, because they aren't processing what happened. They're scanning for what might work next. This is why their growth feels shallow, why apologies sound performative. They didn't learn anything, they adapted. It tempts you to believe maybe this time is different, but watch closely. True reflection creates consistency over time. Adaptation creates short-term alignment, followed by regression. The moment pressure lifts, the old behavior resurfaces. The mask simply swaps designs. That's why you see cycles, over and over. Each new version is just another attempt to regain footing without ever addressing the emptiness underneath. And this is where the awakened empath gains an irreversible advantage. You stop listening to words. You stop negotiating intentions. You stop hoping behavior will stabilize. You measure one thing only: pattern. Once you see that every adaptation is reactive, not reflective, the illusion loses all power. You stop waiting for growth that will never come. You stop offering chances to a structure incapable of using them. And here's the part narcissists never anticipate. When you no longer reward adaptation with access, they run out of costumes. There's nothing left to put on. If this series is resonating with you, it's because you're no longer searching for explanations. You're recognizing structures. And that's exactly what the Silent Regime channel is about. No noise, no theatrics, just clarity, pattern recognition, and psychological endgames. If you're done being confused and ready to see manipulation for what it is, consider subscribing. In the next chapter, we'll break down the moment the narcissist realizes the performance isn't working anymore, and why that realization triggers panic, escalation, and self-sabotage all at once. The most dangerous moment for a narcissist is the moment they realize the act no longer has an effect. Not when you leave, not when you confront them, but when nothing they do moves you anymore. This is the point where confidence mutates into panic. Up until now, every tactic had a purpose. Gaslighting created doubt. Guilt pulled you back. Charm softened consequences. Anger restored control. But suddenly, none of it lands. Your reactions flatten. Your explanations stop. Your emotional availability disappears. And that's when the narcissist understands something they've spent their entire life avoiding. The performance is failing. This realization doesn't lead to insight. It leads to escalation. They begin cycling tactics faster and with less precision. Contradictions multiply. Emotions spike and crash. You'll see it in real time. One moment they're apologetic, the next accusatory, then nostalgic, then cold, then generous, then cruel. Not because they're complex, because they're scrambling. A performer without feedback loses timing. A narcissist without reaction loses structure. And this is where they begin to outsmart themselves. They overplay their hand. They reveal desperation. They contradict the image they're trying to protect. What once looked controlled now looks chaotic. What once felt powerful now feels exposed. And the empath doesn't need to do anything at all. No counterattack. No correction. No explanation. Silence becomes strategic by default. Because the more the narcissist tries to force the performance back into place, the more obvious it becomes that it was never real. This is the turning point. The moment when you stop wondering whether you misread them. The moment when doubt collapses. The moment when clarity locks in permanently. You aren't watching someone struggle to save a relationship. You're watching someone panic because the illusion they lived inside no longer has an audience. And once that happens, there is no graceful recovery. In the next chapter, we'll examine the most unsettling realization of all. What it feels like for the narcissist to understand they no longer exist in your inner world at all. If you've made it this far, it's because the narcissist you dealt with wasn't just a concept. It was your lived reality. You didn't simply observe a performance. You endured being inside it, and somewhere along the way, something decisive happened. The narcissist stopped existing in your inner world, not because you forced detachment, not because you shut down emotionally, but because clarity finally replaced confusion. That moment is subtle, and it's powerful. It's when you realize you're no longer mentally orbiting them. You're no longer anticipating their moods, no longer rehearsing conversations you'll never have. They may still be out there, adapting, cycling tactics, performing for new audiences, but they are no longer inside you. And if you've experienced narcissistic abuse, you know how profound that shift is. For a long time, your mind was occupied. Your nervous system stayed alert. Your empathy was constantly being recruited against you. You questioned yourself. You over-explained. So if you're here now, watching this with recognition instead of doubt, that means something important. You didn't break. You learned. You learned to trust patterns over promises. You learned to listen to your body instead of their words. You learned that wanting clarity didn't make you weak. It meant you were healthy in a distorted dynamic. And most importantly, you learned that psychologically walking away is not abandonment, it's sovereignty. There is a quiet dignity in no longer needing answers from a narcissist who was never answering honestly to begin with. There is peace in realizing you don't need them to admit anything for the truth to be real. So, if no one has said this to you clearly yet, let it land now. What you went through was real, your confusion was earned, and your clarity was hard-won. You didn't lose yourself. You found yourself the moment you stopped trying to be understood by someone who was only ever performing. In the final chapter, we'll talk about what happens next. The last realization the narcissist comes to when they understand the audience is gone for good, and why the end is always quiet, cold, and irreversible. The final realization a narcissist has is never dramatic. It doesn't come with confrontation. It doesn't arrive with closure. It comes quietly. At some point, they stop waiting for you to return, not because they healed, not because they understood, but because the absence stopped feeling temporary. They replay the sequence one last time. Gaslighting didn't pull you back. Guilt didn't work. Nostalgia failed. Anger didn't intimidate you. Silence didn't punish you. Nothing restored access. And that's when it settles in. You didn't leave emotionally. You didn't disengage strategically. You exited the stage. This is the moment the narcissist has no language for. They can't reframe it. They can't argue with it. They can't rewrite it, because the loss wasn't loud enough to respond to. They don't get the relief of conflict. They don't get the validation of explanation. They don't get the comfort of a final conversation. They're left with something far more destabilizing: irrelevance. The performance ends not because it failed publicly, but because there is no one left watching. And once the audience is gone, the role collapses on its own. No matter how many times they replay it, no matter how many new masks they try on, no matter how many people they perform for next, one thing is permanently changed. They know what it feels like to lose someone who saw through them completely and walked away without noise. That knowledge doesn't fade. It follows them into every interaction, every future attempt at control, every moment they try to feel powerful again. Because once someone exits without reaction, without explanation, without fear, the illusion never fully recovers, and you don't need to witness that. You don't need to hear about it. You don't need confirmation. Your silence already delivered the message, not as punishment, not as revenge, but as finality. The game didn't end because you won. It ended because you stopped playing. And nothing a narcissist fears more than that.